So like I hear like a little bit of like a fuzz like right now. Like did you like move around or anything? Do you
No.
like is your microphone near your clothes? Like how is it situated?
Yeah, it could be that.
Okay.
All right, we're gonna do another test.
So I only said witty introduction because I thought it'd be funny to write that. I'm just I don't know like what.
All right, so are we gonna start off with a witty introduction? Or are we gonna have like some music, like welcome to this week's version of ClashCast, starring Marcin and Nick Scala.
You know I've been recording all of this, right? Like, hi, I'm Marcin.
Hi, I'm Nick.
And this is the ClashCast. The idea of the ClashCast is that we put two fanboys on opposing sides of a tech topic. So, Microsoft announcements, Apple announcements. Marcin, which is me, is a Microsoft fanboy, and Nick is an Apple fanboy. And we discuss these topics in the most biased way possible. So you'll get you'll get both perspectives, and we hope you enjoy it. I don't know, something like that.
I think we should just cut that and use that.
Okay.
All right, so you're just gonna open up with something like Microsoft held their keynote.
You
don't call it keynote because that's an Apple app.
No, they call it briefing because it's business.
That's lame.
So they opened with the Windows 10, the next chapter briefing, and basically the way they've been setting this entire launch window up is they've scheduled several events that target different audiences. So back in I think November we had the introduction, and it was very many people were disappointed. A lot of people jumped on them because they were saying, "Oh, all we've added now is the thing from OS 10 where you can have virtual desktops." But they said during the event that there would be more coming for consumers in January, and then for developers, I think in March or April, which is when they have Build every year. So Build is that big developer event. So then they had this event. It was very quiet beforehand. We knew a few leaks, like the Spartan browser and things like that. And the event started, basically.
Great introduction, Marcin. So as you being a Microsoft fanboy, what would you say is your biggest disappointment of the event?
All right, so we're just gonna take the biggest disappointment and the most impressive, and we're gonna kind of mix things up. We're gonna have the Microsoft fanboy talk about the most disappointing part of the Microsoft event.
Well, because I could definitely talk about the biggest disappointment of the event.
Right, so it's all very predictable. Let's mix it up. Let's make it a little bit less predictable. I think what I didn't see that kind of might have put off a few people is the phone side of it. And they did show off the software, but maybe a little bit more of a view on where the hardware is going. So we have, we had the iPhone launch, very successful. We have a lot of the high-end device makers that refresh their products every year. So the things that cost $500-$600, the Galaxy S, probably you don't agree that that's like a premium device and it's just all iPhone for you, but you understand what I mean by like that price bracket and like how we tend to.
Absolutely. I mean, Apple only makes the best phones, so they only have the highest price bracket, but definitely there's consumers in other price brackets.
Right. And then, but there's that level, that high-end level where
flagships, if you will.
Flagships, yes. We could call them the hero devices, the ones that represent, that people lust over, that kind of the enthusiasts from both from the camp that supports Android, that supports iPhone, that supports Windows Phone. Those are the piece of devices that they love to show off more. So like Lumia had some really great flagships in the past with awesome cameras and a little bit of a unique design, more like organic with the flow. They've kind of mixed.
Really just awesome cameras, though, right?
Yeah, that's the only thing that you'll give. I understand as an Apple fanboy, but I think better battery life too than the iPhone usually.
Battery life is never our strong point, but you're going to charge your phone every day anyways. I have a charger at work, I have a charger at home. Battery life doesn't really kill me.
Didn't you like the wireless charging that the high-end Lumias have too? You just plop it down on the little pad and, charge it.
Yeah, sure. Another gimmick to get you to buy a Windows phone.
Okay. Regardless, what I didn't not like, and I didn't expect it, but I think that there has been a lot of silence in this arena, is news on the next flagship. The last flagship launched last February. It was called the Lumia Icon. We had a few friends who were very enthusiastic about it. and it was very cool. It's a little heavy, but it has a nice battery life. It's very fast, gorgeous screen, 20 megapixel camera, and they did the bigger version, the phablet version, which is the 1520, which is what I own. So they have the Icon and the 1520, and we haven't had anything else since then. So it's been about a year or a little bit longer since we've heard anything about on the flagship front. And in the USA, where the market is much more, well, we have more, income than many other countries do. The emerging markets tend to buy the cheaper phones. Here, we don't really have that hero device where you can have like the community get around or like kind of show off the hardware to, your friends. Like, oh, that's really cool. What is that? Like, the hardware is part of the, they work together, the hardware and software, something that Apple knows really well. They always make the hardware look a little bit better every year, and kind of step by step, just to keep things interesting. And I think that's what was missing, a little bit of news on that front. That was the biggest disappointment, even though it was ostensibly a Windows 10 event. So
it's kind of interesting because you always think that in the past Microsoft has been, well, I guess Microsoft's always been a software company, but for me, it seems like Apple is lagging a little bit in the software field, and their hardware is coming really a long way, even though incrementally. So I think that's interesting that, you always think of Apple combining hardware and software, but lately the software has been a little bit lacking. But I guess that's a topic for another discussion.
Right. So just for the audience, the way that we structure this show is that we'll try to have an episode up right after or very soon after a large tech event. We like to focus on Apple and Microsoft, but that doesn't mean that we won't cover Google, for example, because they're a big presence in the online world. And we'll also talk about, we might have episodes where we don't have a big event. We just go over like some cool news topics or, something that, piqued our interest. So that's what you guys can look forward to. So for Nick, what was the most impressive thing that you saw at the Windows 10 event?
All right, I'm going to shoot myself in the foot for this one because we're going to have a discussion on it later, and I'm going to completely bash it. But I have to say that the most impressive thing, if we're talking about a technological feat and it being something impressive, I would have to say it's the HoloLens. But obviously there's problems there, but overall I'd have to say that's impressive.
Okay, so I think that we could just launch that discussion, right?
All right, fantastic. So my main struggle with the HoloLens, although it is, again, an impressive technological feat, and it's something that we really haven't seen before, although there's a couple of other companies out there doing something similar, like Magic Leap. So let's not, say Microsoft is completely the pioneer here, but, Apple's never the pioneer, of course.
I don't think we ever have that, though, right? We always have 3 or 4 companies working on something, and it's always one that releases first, another one that polishes it, or, there's always a little bit of a pattern.
Right, there's always going to be some small company somewhere already working on this thing.
Right.
So I guess, I don't know how you want to start this, but the main problem that I have is the use cases, strong use cases for the HoloLens. And I guess where it falls short for me is maybe I'm more of a consumer technology guy, and I definitely am. So this definitely has some commercial aspects, but in terms of it becoming a mass adoption and truly a success, which I think in order for technology success, it does have to have, big benefits to a significant audience. That falls short. So maybe you can enlighten me on some strong use cases.
Well, for the benefit of the audience, I think they probably heard about it, but just to go over what it is, HoloLens is a project that, well, interestingly enough, it had to have been started during the Steve Ballmer era because they've said they've been working on it for 3 or 4 years, right?
So, Steve Ballmer.
Yes, so a lot of things that Nadella has, launched, started underneath. So I wonder if Ballmer was like getting to it and he just like kind of gave up right before he could have. I wonder like what the company would look like if they had these projects keep going, but they had, Nadella has slightly a different way on how Microsoft should fit. But that's an aside for a different day. In terms of what the HoloLens is, it's fully contained. So that's like what really impressed me about it. It's a computer that you wear on your head. There's no.
Except for the demo version, of course.
Right, but the idea is that didn't they show the thing that she wore on stage? I didn't see any wires, or they just had I think they had several versions, right? So like they had the one that was ready with that demo on stage. That was like complete, but they had to do the other things for the journalists because those demos weren't ready. I don't think we can, the idea is, and they shown a form factor that's one contained device. So I think that's what we should be
Yep,
expecting to see.
definitely.
So it has a visor, and unlike Google Glass or something like that, where they have just they project a flat image on your glasses, they somehow bounce light particles in between before they get onto the visor and into your eyes. So gives this this look of the whatever is being projected of being 3D. I can't explain it, but the idea is that you have holograms floating in the world around you, and the way that they demoed it is that lots of computing tasks that you usually need, like a device, a desktop, or a handheld, you could just do by waving at them, and they would float in the environment around you. Or in the best, I think the most in going to use cases which we're discussing, I think the best demo was, or at least the best idea that they displayed was for designers and prototypes. So the idea of just being able to manipulate an object before it's actually created without it being on this flat screen, I think that gets rid of like a barrier for designers. It just makes the process much more natural and intuitive. Um, I think that that's like the first use case that we can talk about. And I think I agree with you. Like in the first version, if this is the product, if this is how it's going to look, the bulk of it, and if that's how it's going to look when it first launches, I think sometime around the end of the year or the start of next is what we've been told, like in that Windows 10 launch timeframe. I think it won't be very consumer oriented as a device, but the technology is something that a lot of people will be interested in, especially in the corporate field or in the more design oriented field. So I think that the idea that they launched, or they showed this product off and then they said, hey, these are all the things it can do. It's much better than, I think, when they've done several launches in the past. They kind of launch a device and they don't really explain the differentiator or what it can really accomplish that's different from what's already out there. I think like that. I don't know if that's the impression. If
Right,
that's a,
there's some things to keep in mind. I mean, this is a first gen device. It is releasing it to consumers is going to be something that no one else has really done on a mass scale. So I think we do have to take it with a little grain of salt. And like, when the Apple Watch launches or when the original iPhone launched, it's really going to be the apps, and I guess if there's an app store for this, which there probably will be linked up to the same app store, it's really going to be the apps that make this product. But I mean, there's still some fundamentally things wrong with holograms, and one of them is, your interaction with them. The fact that they don't physically exist in the space, you can't really, and I think Engadget brings this up in their review, you can't physically go out and touch something, but when you go and try to, you get this sort of weird feeling, I guess, because it doesn't really exist.
right, your finger goes through it.
Right, and I don't know if this is a fault of holograms, but Engadget also mentioned that the whole reality of it being out in front of you was a little bit taken back when they said that some of the holograms projected were a little bit see-through looking. So I don't know if that's the physics of holograms,
hmm
or that's something that can be improved upon. But that's also if the purpose of it is to make it look like it's really there and it's a little bit see-through and you can't really touch it, I don't know. Is there
Right.
something fundamentally wrong with that?
Okay. I think that those are fair points, and I think there are definitely already use cases where that's fine, right? So if I'm like we're on a Skype call right now and I want to see you, I don't really mind if you're slightly see-through, right? That
All right,
doesn't.
but why do I
I
want to
know.
see
I
you
know.
projected on my wall? I mean, I have a perfectly 27-inch iMac here. If I need to see your face pretty big, I think 27 inches is large enough for me.
Exactly. Okay, so yeah, so this comes back to kind of like the philosophical, like why launch this so early, and I think that they're taking a lot.
Or why launch this at all?
Why launch this at all? Um, I think there's going to be some kind of. I think the idea of getting rid of like the friction, like getting the technology out of the way, like letting people feel like more at home in the actual, physical realm. I think that it's a good. I mean,
It's a good philosophy.
that's what technology has been doing, sort of. Like the idea of a touch screen is that you are interacting directly with content, right? You don't have that keyboard and mouse in front of you. That's like that, not a barrier, but that additional interface that kind of it makes the interaction more abstract. So the touchscreen is the next idea, and then they're thinking that the holograms are the next. And there are obviously challenges, and I think there are challenges whenever a technology launches. I think the difference between, let's just take the original iPhone as a contrast. I think the iPhone was Google. It's more towards the Google route the way they did it, except it's in between. So a lot of the stuff Microsoft does is in between the Google and Apple philosophy, and I think this launch was no different. I think what they wanted to do was first kind of bring the cool back, like to Microsoft, like have a front page headline that the Windows 10 event by itself, to be honest, wouldn't have gotten too many, like it wouldn't be a New York Times, or the cover of Wired wouldn't have had that. So,
Definitely. It's definitely brought them, some PR that they definitely wanted.
right, and it's not like they just put this thing together, because obviously even what they have, even with its faults, it's still extremely a lot of work that must have taken at least 1, 2, 3 years to do. And the guy who did it worked on the Kinect for Microsoft, so that was like fastest selling consumer device in history. I think what they're doing is they're launching it early so that the public can see it, they can see that it's cool, but also that developers can get their hands on it. And I think that is where your concern about the use cases might be addressed. I think I heard that in April at Build Event they'll be giving live demos, and developers will be able to get their hands on this thing by spring or summer, like the early versions. And that's sort of like if you follow along with the VR stuff, Oculus Rift, they've given developers that hardware for about 2 years already, and they've improved the hardware in the meantime. So you could get your hands on an Oculus Rift, and I think we know what we're discussing, right? The goggles that you play like games as if you're there, and that's what Facebook bought,
Right.
the company. I think it's just that element of collaboration, which you see in a lot of what the things that Microsoft develops. They allow the user to beta, to try out Windows 10 early. And sure, it's buggy, but I think that's kind of like our culture now. We like to get things immediately and fast. We like to see what's new, even if we have to deal with a few bugs. I don't think that that's as big of a concern as it used to be. I think thanks to Google, with a lot of the stuff they do, they keep like iterating, and so like we've gotten used to it as a culture.
Right. So I guess, it definitely is it's a first gen product, and it's definitely revolutionary in its own right. But and I don't want to sit here and say, oh well, the things aren't clear, the field of view is a little bit narrow because it is first gen. But going back to the philosophy, how does this benefit me more than using a computer? I mean, I get that it puts it in the real world, and I also have that problem with even the Apple Watch and going into wearables, and I definitely had this problem with Google Glass. It's sort of putting technology out there, but then also removing some social aspects and becoming invasive.
hmm Yeah, and I think it's too early to say, and like that sounds like the easy answer just for me to deflect the question, but I think that it just legit is too early. I think that there are we don't use bulldozers at work. Like there are specialist devices and equipment that you and I never use, but we know exist, and we know how they contribute to the economy and how society keeps chugging along. So like all of these different types of equipment, like we don't need to use the gigantic server farms, for example, that Facebook uses to host their service. Or
I don't know about you, but NickScala.com definitely needs those gigantic server farms.
I wonder if that's because he designed it poorly
It's
and
a
it's running
load
slow.
balancing issue. It's a
Okay,
load balancing issue.
all right, personal, marketing right there. I think we might have to
Well,
cut that.
ClashTech.com, I think that definitely needs the server farms as well.
It will soon if we keep on the trajectory. But okay, we are definitely getting off topic here. So HoloLens is cool, and I think it did what Microsoft wanted to do. I think that you and the people who have your mindset, and I totally understand. I don't think the first version of the product is going to be something that people are going to rush out to their rigorous Microsoft store and pick up and buy. I don't think they're even targeting it like that. I think they're going to, like with a lot of their other more of their software, they sell it more to businesses, or to they know who would want to use this. And I think if they build the use cases for those, they can spread it out from there. As the hardware gets better, they can add more use cases and make it more useful. And I think that there'll always be, I think that's the beauty of computing. We have options. We're still using desktop PCs, even though ostensibly tablets do some things better and smartphones do other things better. It could be like,
Macintosh celebrating its 31st anniversary yesterday.
yes.
So, Marcin, I'm just going to ask you one question. If you had to guess, what do you think they'll release the price point of this at?
At least $1,500 for the first version.
You think it's going to be that cheap?
Closer to 2,000.
See, I don't know all the technology behind it, but the way they're hyping it up with the specific, HPU processor, I think that's what they call it.
Right.
I was thinking like 5,000 or 6,000. I don't really know the technology behind this, but if they do get it down to 1,500 or somewhere in that $1,000 range, which I'm sure they definitely want, this could definitely could help out adoption of this.
hmm I
Even because $1,000 or 1,500 for obviously not for your average person, but it's reachable. If this is really cool, I want to try it out. $1,500 is not that much to lay down.
No, I definitely agree, and I think once again, I think it's just they're being very gradual with this. I don't think they mind if it's expensive at the start. I think they know how many people are going to buy this. They don't think that this is going to be like a mass market hit. It's there for the PR, and it's there to start working on this new vision, right? I think that's what the approach is. It's like this very deliberate approach, and sure, someone might get ahead of them, but again, you see how much technology and how much work this it still needs. I'm not sure that anyone's really like, even if someone is at their level, I don't really see someone just like getting out in front with something that's light years ahead out of nowhere.
Yeah, and just one last comment that I have besides the summary. I think that the physical design of the product is pretty cool.
It looks kind of Star Trekky, but like in that like a little less nerdy way. When I first saw it, like I thought it was very like, yeah, that's fine. I get why it looks like that, and like they made it look as not offensive as possible given how big it is.
Right. Yeah, I mean, it has to be big for obviously technology concerns, especially in an earlier iteration of the product. But overall, it's a cool design.
Yeah, and just one note, one note on this.
I see what you did there.
One note on this is that I think the recently an article came out just for your benefit and the audience's benefit that it runs on an unannounced Intel Atom processor. So that's one part of it that we know, kind of like the next Atom, like the small processors that they put in the tablets that are more energy efficient. So I'm guessing that's why they needed the next generation. That's not really, it's probably like a prototype. So that's kind of part of the tech that we know that's in there.
Right. So it's cool. It's revolutionary. It's a step in the right direction. It pushes the bar. Anything that pushes the bar from any company, even if it's Google, which me and you both are not big fans of, but even if it pushes the bar, it sparks innovation in other companies. And also if you want to think about it more philosophical, it creates jobs and builds economies, and it'll help people. With vast use cases, obviously, as more and more apps come out. But for me, in terms of calling it as they do in the promo video, which I'd expect them to do, calling it the future of interacting with technology or computers, I don't know. I don't know if it's strong enough as a use case as benefits to a computer. And the reason why I think we've stayed with a keyboard, mouse, and desktop computer for so long is because it is a really useful tool. And I'm sure there's been plenty of other products that tried to smash that model, and they haven't really been successful. Although tablets, come out, they're still not really taking over. They're not replacing, at least as of now, the traditional keyboard, mouse, and desktop.
Right. It's all about versatility. It's once you have to have even to have the thought of replacing the PC, you have to be as versatile as it. And there's no device that does it that many functions as probably not it doesn't do everything the best, but it does everything. That's basically the idea. So the next thing we're going to talk about is the Surface Hub. And I think that in terms of this is kind of like the answer, even though we're going reverse order. This HoloLens was last and Surface Hub was before this. I think this is a much more clear product. Like you can understand what it's for. It's definitely very far along and it's ready for use. And I think that it's not very concerning for consumers, but again, another piece of cool tech, and it looks like it could compete with the Cisco systems, for example, those things that you see in boardrooms where they have like the cameras separate from the TV and they have like this whole speaker setup. Like this kind of integrates a lot of things together. You can stream things on your PC. I don't know if you have much to say about it. I thought it was a very, very clear introduction. They didn't really, they just said what it was, and people were like, okay, yeah.
Yeah, I mean it's a clear product, clear use cases here. Obviously, this is an enterprise device. 80 is it 80 inches?
There's two sizes. There's the 55 and the 80-ish, something like that. Yeah.
And they're both 4K, right?
Yeah, 4K.
Yeah, I think that was an interesting way to go. It's definitely the future. Do we have a price on this?
We don't, but like obviously, I think they would target it I mean, like, are we going to assume that they're idiots and like overprice everything like 3 times more? Or I
No,
think
definitely not. Because this is an enterprise device, I don't think their pricing is too much of a concern.
right. I think they just have to come in cheaper than the equivalent systems, or at least around the same. I mean, the fact that you either have to, you either have to have a cheaper price or you have to be better. If they have the same price and they're obviously better, then they're set, I think.
Right. I think it's, like I said, it's a cool product. Definitely has a lot of use cases and a lot of useful features that obviously enterprises will use. It's interesting to see whether or not we'll see this as the future of computing at home, where maybe you do have this one big screen in your house that you do everything on.
Hmm.
Maybe that's the future. I don't know. But definitely for an enterprise, I think the only issues that they may face is that large enterprises that would be purchasing this don't really like to switch, brands, or because there's a
Yes.
lot of loyalty built in there, and there's a lot of trust and security and all of that stuff that goes into enterprise IT decisions.
Hmm.
So I think that might present a challenge, but it is Microsoft, and we're not talking about a not brand name here. And Microsoft definitely has proven itself in the enterprise field. So.
I think that integration, right? That's kind of could be the selling point. You can't really turn on your Cisco system and just. I think there's like a menu thing that appears on your laptop. You can say synchronize, and then you can just have your PowerPoint slides pop up. I don't think any existing system is that easy.
Right, and on the website it says that it ships with Office. So there you go. Don't even have
Okay.
to buy Office.
Yeah, so that's $100 saved, right? I think that's how much. Okay. All right. The one interesting thing I think about this announcement is that it's a hint, might be a hint about the future hardware plans. And do you know what I might be referring to?
No.
They call it the Surface Hub. So that means that they're applying the Surface brand name to things beyond the tablet. And
That is very interesting. I didn't notice that, but yeah, now that you bring it up, that's definitely an interesting branding point.
so the question is, if we're talking about smartphones, and my concerns beforehand, will they have a line, or will they start to kind of segregate their smartphones into Lumias, the fun low end, things for consumers, and then maybe have like a higher end, not BlackBerry, but the idea of BlackBerry targeted towards enterprises, some kind of Surface high end phone, which would be very interesting to see.
Yeah, I didn't give the name too much thought, but it is definitely interesting because, they have the Surface, and it's not even called like the Surface tablet or anything. It's, just the Surface or the Surface Pro.
The Surface
Um,
Pro and the Surface Hub.
so the Surface Hub and Pro, I don't know, but, it's definitely an interesting naming scheme.
The Surface Phone. I don't know. We'll see. Yeah. Okay, so the we haven't actually talked about what the event was, about, like centered around, and that's Windows 10. So we'll quickly go through this because I think everyone's heard about it, but just to see if we have any concerns, any interesting things that we want to discuss. So we'll go in chronological order. The first thing that they talked about, well, it was really just like little features that they added, and this isn't a surprise, and it's not really on our out of our list of things to discuss, but I think I'll just bring it up. They brought Cortana to the desktop, and well, maybe you have a concern about this in the voice realm and how it could be used on PCs. I think that's here. You had a concern about that.
I think that's definitely a concern. They've talked about bringing Siri to the Mac. I don't even know if it is. I don't think it is on the Mac. I don't know.
I don't think no, it's not. It's not.
It's not there yet, but they definitely talked about it. And giving voice commands to my computer, I don't know. I don't really give voice commands to my phone as well. And, the whole Apple Watch coming out and giving voice commands to my watch, especially out in public, I'll probably look stupid.
Start screaming at it.
Right. So it's what is the benefit compared to what we have now? And is talking to your computer better than just typing in?
Which you can do, but I think you have to train people to ask the questions, right? Because what it is, first and foremost, what it is very useful, and every operating system has this. It's an easy to reach search interface, so you can just type and you can get your files. And I think one interesting thing is that they automatically, the theme of Microsoft, and I think Apple, everyone's doing this a lot more nowadays, is the integration Like you can reach into your OneDrive and get a file that you needed like for a presentation just by typing in, knowing what the presentation was for, and then you'll see the files pop up, which I think that's very useful, especially once again if you're doing work and you have some kind of file you want to access in the corporate OneDrive, you can just pull it up without having to go through like the list of folder trying to figure out where someone might have put it, and I think that's very useful. The other thing that she does, Cortana, she learns about you, which might creep some people out, but I found that their answer to this when they started doing this on the phone was very astute. Instead of Google now, they kind of collect information on you from when you search things, when you put map locations, when you travel from one place to another, they like automatically kind of start suggesting things. That's how I understand it works on Android, or at least the initial philosophy of it was. It kind of creeps people out because even though we all know that all these companies are collecting this information on us, we kind of like to feel that we control it. And what they did very interesting with Cortana is like they said, okay, she's your assistant, and like if you were a rich guy with a corporate assistant who put your meetings together, a secretary, she would have kind of like a notebook. She would know the things that are important, the things that are on your schedule, and you basically have this notebook that you can access through any interface with Cortana, whether it's through the phone or on your desktop, and you can see what she knows about you, and you can tell her, no, forget about this or don't track this stuff, and that's I think that's a very it makes it more trustworthy as a feature. So maybe that would help it kind of gain traction. I think as your concerns about the voice, I think are very relevant, especially in a work environment. If the one place, and then they did show this off, is like if you are at home and you have like the home PC on home computer, right? They think like the PC as the hub in the house. It's kind of cool to like be able to tell Cortana, hey, stop playing this music, or turn on like that's nice. Nothing too amazing, but
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, we definitely see this transition to search, and not just like, the old Spotlight days in OS X was just searching for your files. And with Yosemite, Spotlight became, this prominent universal search where you can search the web, search your files, and so much more. Apple tried to get into Siri being your personal assistant when it first came out, but it's never gotten there, and I don't understand why. I think Google now was later than Siri, and obviously Cortana was, and they're just like so much more full-fledged products than what Siri is, and that's one of my problems with Apple.
Right.
That Siri just hasn't delivered on its products.
Mm-hmm. I enjoy using. I think that so. Again, we're making this a little bit longer than I thought, but since this is our first show, I think let's just. I want to put out like kind of my thoughts and your thoughts on like our thinking like on kind of these directions in the tech industry. So I guess we can take a little bit of time to talk about. I think what they did that's smart with Cortana and like kind of like lit up my little geek nerd heart was making her name. Cortana is a Halo character, right? So there's this little bit small audience again that they're appealing to, where even if you don't know who she is, she kind of has more of a personality. Even in the advertisements or in the if you don't ask like things that are very direct, like you want to get information, like she kind of has a little bit of a personality, and it's not very abrasive. Like you could definitely do this wrong. Like you could make your computer assistant extremely annoying, but I think it's the way that she speaks and the things like that, and the kind of the background, it kind of like all these little factors, they kind of add up to make her a little bit more interesting to use than let's say a Siri, which I to be honest, I think on the Siri side that I think that Apple kind of squandered it, and I think they had plenty of opportunity to keep updating it, but it's very strange that from what I understand, you obviously have the most experience, it hasn't really changed that much since it was introduced.
No, it hasn't. With every iteration of iOS, you can give it a little bit more prompts. Like in the latest version of iOS 8, it can now tell you what song you're listening to, but it's never made that leap.
Mm-hmm.
But with Cortana, I guess we're one step closer to the operating system from her.
Yes, which is interesting because like they always say that she's always learning. So I wonder at what point like she starts to become more.
Do you see yourself dating Cortana in the future, Marcin?
No, Master Chief's got her. I don't want to, get in between them two. So,
All right. So what's the next topic?
Continuum. So I think this is a very interesting topic because it kind of shows not maybe not the progress, but the reversal of thinking at Microsoft since the Windows 8 era. Windows 8, you had it on your tablet, you had it on your desktop, and you basically had two interfaces. One that worked better with mouse and keyboard, and one that worked better with touch. Now, I kind of defended it, but secretly I've always been kind of unhappy with the direction. I was thinking that they would fix it, and they eventually have in this new way of thinking. It's taken a while, as you like to point out uh, jokingly a lot, but I think that it's a very smart implementation now. So basically, what is interesting is if you're a Windows 8 user, you'll be more confused with using the touch interface, the Continuum on your tablet than someone coming from Windows 7 would be, because the rules are much closer, it's more visually consistent, and I've installed it on my Surface Pro 3, the newest preview build, and I'm very impressed with how it kind of switches modes. So the Continuum is if you are not using your keyboard, like if you flip your keyboard behind the screen or if you take it off, it asks you, and I don't know if it has to ask you this. I would like to make it automatic because I never want to not switch modes when I do that. It makes the interface more touchable. It makes all the apps easy to swipe. Any kind of app, whether you have a Win32 app, which is the old school, it kind of like scales it. So I think that's very interesting. I think it's a different approach that is more comfortable for people coming from older Windows computers.
Okay. So here's my problem. If you have, so the whole Continuum thing is that there's a desktop mode and there's a tablet mode, right?
Yes.
And I think you could see where I'm going from this.
Uh-huh.
So I'm on my tablet. I'm in tablet mode. I'm on a desktop or want to use my tablet like a desktop with a keyboard and a mouse. I'm going to go to desktop mode,
Okay.
right?
Yes.
So the whole unified one device does everything smoothly. Windows 8 is going to solve all your problems. We've created the true all-in-one. They're back to like it's me picking up an iPad and being able to connect a keyboard to it and then switch to Mac OS, and then when I remove the keyboard switch to iOS. It's like,
But I
you
think
know, go ahead.
but I think that that's exactly what it's not. I think that if you had theoretically, if you had the iPad that did that with the keyboard that changes from iOS to OS 10, I think that's the old approach. You have two very distinct visual styles. First off, you have like icons organized in one thing, so we can say that that's like the equivalent to the start screen versus having your desktop and your start button, right, and the start menu. But
Right.
now you have I think they do little like small things. Like when you do switch, you're obviously going to want to touch the screen more. So what they do is they make the start menu the start screen immediately, right? So when you switch, if you're on your desktop mode, if you click on things, it's a menu, so you can scroll through it easily. But if you switch it to the tablet mode, it makes it full screen, like how you used to have the start screen. So I think I know that there's always, well, everything's a compromise, right? So that's what you're trying to bring up, that you kind of have a compromise. But I think that if they want to, I think they're very set on the vision of Windows 10 running on everything, right? They want everyone to know if I'm using Windows 10 on something, it's going to work very close to Windows 10 on my desktop, which is not what Windows 8 did. Because if you had a Windows 8 tablet, it worked mostly differently than it did on your desktop, given how you want to use each device, because that's just how they designed the two different interfaces. They just made them like separate.
I would say though that when I installed the latest technical preview build on Windows 10. By the way, I don't have a PC. I have a Mac running Parallels. Let's get that out there.
He just wants to be informed. Of course, he wants to stay up to date on the other big tech companies. So of course he tests their software.
Right, and obviously there's still reason to keep Windows around with certain apps working better on Windows. Cough, cough, Excel. When I first installed the preview, the latest build, and I opened up the settings app and it didn't go full screen, I was like, hallelujah, finally.
Yeah, I get it. Like, what's the point of wasting all of that screen estate just to show 5 options? What's the point? I don't
That
know.
was always my biggest problem with Windows 8 is that everything would open up in full screen, and 8 was terrible. 1 they made it a little better with the menu bar coming down on top.
Right.
But yeah, devoting a whole screen to settings or the store or stuff like that, it just didn't make sense. And this solves it by again taking a huge step back to pretty much the way it was before.
Yeah, but it's not. So 7 had tablets, but they literally didn't change anything. You were touching the little, like, the start button, and then you had to, like, click on the thing, and then, like, there was no adjustment in. You didn't, like, the idea of. I know it's hard to describe, but I'm easily able to kind of understand. Like, you have the new multiple desktops feature. You swipe in from the left on your screen, and that shows you all of your apps open, and then the several desktops. So you can be using like desktops on your tablet, and you don't have to cognitively like think, okay, now I'm in keyboard and mouse mode, so I have to change like my setup of all my windows and like make sure that my desktops are different. Because when I was in tablet mode, this is how it works, and it's different. It's basically the same exact thing, and I think it's just a lot smarter. I don't think there's nothing is 100% perfect, and I think that if the vision is they want Windows 10 to work the same across all devices, this is much closer to being successful than the old thing.
It's definitely a step in the right direction.
Okay, so
What do we have next, Marcin?
Windows 10 for phones. Interestingly enough, so I think this is one of the Microsoft branding you like to laugh at. They just keep changing the branding for the phone version. It used to be Windows Mobile. Then when 7 came out around like right after the iPhone, they called it Windows Phone 7 because Windows 7 was out. They called it Windows Phone 8, Windows Phone 8.1. Now it's just Windows 10. So like everything's Windows 10. So like the names changed again. I'm sure that you find that very funny. But I think they're going in the right direction. It doesn't look like they're as far along with this as they are with the desktop version because obviously we don't have a preview build yet. It'll be ready soon, but not yet. So we can, whoever has a Windows Phone, which is not a very big population, yes. I love preempting your points.
It's like I don't even have to say anything anymore.
Yeah, we know each other so well that regardless, the design consistency is there, so I think it's funny, but I think they're trying to point out, like, if you open the settings app, again, if you open the settings app on your desktop, it'll have the same look, even though it'll be, obviously it'll be more scrolly because you have a vertical screen versus that, but you have the same iconography, it kind of migrates a lot of your visual preferences from your desktop to your phone. So again, you have consistency, although it does recognize that it's a phone, so you don't have a start menu and a taskbar on the bottom like you used to have in the old, in the medieval ages before the iPhone on the Windows Mobile, which is
My friend had one of those phones, and that was an experience.
I don't know how that worked.
Well, he had a stylus.
Okay. And we know how that works on small screens. It works fine on a Surface, but
Of course.
yes. Features, not a lot. Movable keyboard, so if you have a big screen, you can kind of adjust the keyboard so you can have one-handed. Is that something iOS does? It's like a little bit different though, right? You can
Movable keyboard on the iPad. You can split the keyboard so you can type with your two thumbs. You can slide it up, slide it down, but not on the phones.
Okay.
But the phones are getting bigger, so maybe that's a future thing, but only on iPads for now.
I think it's a smart feature, right? I don't think there's anything to argue about with that if you have like a phablet.
No, although there's stuff to argue about if you have a phablet, but we won't get into that.
Actionable notifications, just the stuff that other people have had for a while. Speech integration, and a little joystick, kind of like a virtual version of the little nub that you have on like the Lenovo desktops. So you can, I don't know how that works. I don't understand it because I haven't seen it. They just mentioned it. It was like in a tech blog that I read that they had this little on your keyboard. There's like this little circle that you can like move around to type better or to choose stuff better. I don't understand that. So
That's pretty interesting. I actually read an Apple rumor the other day that they patented a home button for the iPhone that you could it's spring loaded that you could push in and it would like pop out a bit and use it as a joystick. I don't think we'll ever see that, but I just thought it was interesting.
yeah, well, just as an aside, the issue with that is the iPhone is so thin. Where would the joystick be? Like you'd have to, when would it? What would pop out? Right.
Right. It's just a patent, and they patent a million things, including they just patented a stylus for the iPad. So we'll see what happens with that.
Oh, so they're copying Microsoft again. Oh, regardless. Okay, universal apps. This is pretty big because it addresses several issues, or it should address several issues. One, on a desktop versus tablet, it makes it so that the app knows kind of what form factor it's on, so it kind of readjusts its size and the UI elements. And on the other hand, you can build universal apps for Windows phones. So they're bringing the store together. Separately, before you had two stores, the Windows Store and the Windows Phone Store. So the apps in the phone store were separate from the apps in the desktop and laptop. So this sounds very confusing because it is extremely confusing, and I don't know why they. Maybe it was just technical reasons, or they had two separate teams, like the Ballmer era. The company was very siloed. You had separate teams like fighting for resources. At least from what we know about all these interesting third-party accounts, first-hand accounts. But still, I think it's another story of integration. On the phone side, we do have the app gap, so I'm wondering if this would help, because if you have a developer developing an app for Windows on the desktop, all they really have to do is build in the hooks that allow it to resize to work on the phone. And I'm wondering what your thoughts are on that, if that's something that could help.
Yeah, I definitely think it would help that out, and I think Apple is trying to go this route as well, with the Swift programming language, is sort of building that easier to switch between what a Mac app is and what an iOS app is, even though those are completely two separate worlds. I think with Windows integration and universal apps, I think that'll.
Right. And I think that even though they're separate, I think that what the idea is that a universal app, even besides the UI, it would understand that on a smartphone it doesn't need these features, right? Or people don't use these features, so the developer would hide them. I think that's how it would work, which is extremely smart, because it kind of it makes, instead of developing for three platforms, you're really developing for one, and you're designing a layout for three. It's not like the same. Not that I'm a developer, but I think that that's a lot easier than the current approach on a lot of platforms.
Yep, definitely, and they definitely need to solve that app gap.
Yeah. The last big thing was Xbox. So it's kind of interesting seeing this at the Windows event, because you don't really see a lot of mixing between the two teams, or the two products. I think what they did here was kind of set up the Xbox brand as being more of a presence for you if you're a PC gamer. Like, they're trying to push it more in front of you. And as a PC gamer myself, I think what they did was they respected the mistakes they made before. So on the PC, you have these digital distribution stores, kind of like iTunes. Steam is the big one that has like this humongous social network of 80 million people. So it's all the multiplayer. It's very easy. You have friends lists and things like that. And then on Xbox, you have Xbox Live, obviously. So that's their social network. In previous versions of how they try to integrate Xbox with the PC, they made games that were exclusive to the Xbox Live service. So basically, you'd install the game and you'd have a separate friends list from your Steam account. You'd have to log into your Xbox Live profile, and then you'd have a separate friends list. So for people who played only on the PC, it was very awkward, because you don't really have Xbox Live friends. You can't guarantee that. So they kept trying to push like this Xbox integration into places that people didn't want it. On the PC, PC gamers have this very open mindset, where they kind of want to be able to use lots of different services together and like mix and match, and like they have different recordings things. But it's commendable that they made a new Xbox app which is more socially oriented, and it gives a reason for you to use the Xbox app, and the reason is the game DVR, which they introduced on the Xbox One. Basically, if something cool happens in a game while you're playing it, the DVR is no matter what Windows game. So this is the cool part, because this doesn't have to be like a Microsoft branded game. Any Windows game that you're running, Windows recognizes it, and it's constantly recording up to, I think, 30 seconds in the background. So if something awesome happens in the game you're playing and you want to share it, or if you want to start streaming it through Xbox, you hit a universal keyboard shortcut, and you get like a little interface that lets you like kind of save a clip, and then later on you can edit it. And I think that's like a nice way to kind of push, or at least encourage people to take a little bit more look at the Xbox applications on their PC, which I don't think are very popular at this point, because no one that's a PC gamer would really care about them. They don't really do anything besides give you a friends list if you have an Xbox One, to see what your friends are doing, but not really do anything with them. And then they addressed, so I could move on, but did you have any like comments or any thoughts about what this specific particular thing?
Not really. There's the thing that you can. I don't think you've gotten to it, or maybe you weren't planning on getting it. The thing where you can play an Xbox game to your on your PC.
Yeah, I'll discuss that.
Okay, because I have a problem with that.
Okay, sure. Fine, then we'll talk about that because that's like more negative of the last. Well, okay. One other thing is that this isn't really an announcement. I think this was like one of the sleaziest parts of their entire presentation. They said that you can play games against your Xbox friends, and they showed Fable, whatever it's called, Fable Legends. I don't know how much our audience knows about the Fable series. You probably only know about Halo from Microsoft and probably Forza, the car racing game. But Fable is like this more like fantasy series, which they're taking in like all these other directions. And there's a lot of controversy about it. But the point is, it was an Xbox game, and now they're saying you can play against that someone who's playing on Xbox or with them. This isn't really new because they're basically just developing a separate version of the game for Windows. They just announced at that event, and it's only that one game. So it's not like you can all of a sudden install Halo 4 or 5 on your PC and play against other people. It's just this one specific game, and there have been games before that let you play with other platforms between iOS and Android, some between PC and PlayStation, so it's not really surprising. Now, what Nick wants to address, apparently, so I'm very interested to hear about his concern, is the game streaming. If you have an Xbox One in your household, you can now access the games that are installed from it on any PC in your local network. So that includes your Surface tablet, your any like hybrid device, or your desktop computer. It's something that's becoming more popular as a concept, streaming within the house, but let's see what you have to say.
So I'm not a big gamer, and so I don't really have, too much of a hold here. But if I'm playing, first of all, you can only stream it when you're in your home network,
Yes.
which, it definitely takes a little bit of the cool out of it. Because if I'm playing a game and then I'm going, to work, it'd be cool if I could just pick up my Surface and play the game along the way. But it's right now it's held to your home network, which is fine. I'm sure there's tons of technological issues with streaming over cellular data and different Wi-Fi networks. So
Yeah.
I'm not expecting them to solve the world here. But if I'm playing, sitting on my couch with a controller, looking at a 60-inch screen, maybe I have surround sound. Why? Why would I want to pick up my Surface? Why would I want to go to my desktop? I don't get it.
Right, and I think that a concern, I'm not so hot on this feature either because they are making it sound like, first off, on your desktop PC, they were making it sound like this is a viable option, something that you'd like consider. Maybe I should play like an Xbox game right now instead of playing something that's installed directly on my PC. When you're streaming, you're sending a video across your network. So there's always going to be a little bit of, I don't think they've solved this, I don't think anyone has solved this, but there's always some kind of artifacts because the video stream has to be compressed, right? There's a little bit of latency that has to be introduced to that because the signal has to bounce between your router to your PC, and then when you click on something or when you like move your character, the signal, it's not going straight to your monitor. It first has to get to the Xbox, and then it has to get the signal back to your screen. So I'm not sure. They could have addressed it to a point where it's not noticeable, but that's one concern. Another is the Xbox isn't that powerful if you're playing it on your desktop. Let's assume that you have the newest Call of Duty. You can buy, and I'm assuming this is a PC gamer oriented feature, so that's why I'm addressing it in this manner. I'm addressing it as if a PC gamer wanted to turn on an Xbox game on their gaming computer. If you own Call of Duty on your PC, it'll just look a lot better than on your Xbox because you can adjust the resolution to be your monitor's resolution. The Xbox can only do up to 900, and only some games could do 1080p, and then nothing is adjustable. It's just whatever the developer set because that's how consoles work, right? It's optimized for what the hardware is. So it's not that interesting. I think if you do have a Surface and you want to play remotely, one concern is what if someone else wants to use the Xbox? How is this? Is this taking up the entire processing cycle? So if someone looks at the Xbox while I'm playing on my Surface, they can't do anything. They just see the game.
That's a good point.
They didn't address it, which is telling, I would say.
Yeah, normally I don't talk about, well, anybody doesn't want to talk about the things like Apple leaving out battery life out of the last Apple Watch announcement.
Right.
But yeah.
So it's an interesting thing. I think that was the most gimmicky part of the the cross-platform thing with the Fable game, and then this being able to play the Xbox game on your PC, I think those are the most like gimmicky parts of the presentation. The last thing that they did was DirectX 12, which is always welcome, a new version of DirectX. For those unaware, DirectX is kind of like the language that lets your game talk to your video card and kind of translates, oh, this is what I want it to look like, and then the graphics card understands the language because DirectX translates the game's language into what that's just basically what it is. So here they're promising, and they usually have a good track record. They have a 50% performance increase, so the same hardware gets you like 50% faster performance, or the trade-off, you can have 50% better graphics or detail. Not going too much into that. The interesting part is on mobile devices, the same scene rendered takes up half the battery life, and I think that at least they address that, knowing that Windows 10 is on a lot of mobile devices, or they're trying to get them on more mobile devices. So I think that that's a good point to pursue.
All right, so a recap of the Microsoft event for you, and then I'll give you my recap.
If I were to give it a letter grade, which I know that I like, lots of people like, I would give it an A minus. I think what they did here was they kind of started the year off on a good note. I think that's very important. Like, they were the first big tech company to get their foot out the door and say, hey, this is what we're working on. And they showed something cool that isn't exactly, you and I are not going to be able to buy tomorrow. But then they all united it with a theme, and it's all Windows 10. The HoloLens runs on Windows 10. The Surface Hub runs on Windows 10. That's more important for developers, but consumers get that on the experience side. They get that all these devices, if they like the features, they're going to like that they can bring them across from their desktop to their tablet to their phone. And I think that they got the messaging right. There wasn't much of that arrogance that you kind of saw in past events, like in 2012, 2011, when they were launching Windows 8, or they were launching the first version of the Surface, which was, was cool, but then didn't come out for half a year, and then not a lot of people bought until the Pro got better. So I think that it just shows a more smart approach. It's as if like they hired some smarter people, or I don't know, something changed. Well, we know what changed. A lot of the executives got shuffled around, but obviously things look better for them than they did a year ago. I think that's the biggest takeaway.
Yeah, I'd have to agree. If I'm also going to assign a letter grade, and I'm going to be a little bit more critical, but not too much critical, I'd give them a B plus. I think we definitely see a more unified Microsoft. It's much clearer, their vision. I think Nadella is doing a great job leading the efforts there at Microsoft. A lot of cool things, which I don't think I'd ever say before at a Microsoft event. For me, it's a little bit easier to see their philosophy, where Windows 8 was sort of like, hey, this isn't going to work. Where, tablets and desktops and everything all speaks together. Here, they've given me a little bit more clarity around things. The HoloLens is cool. Surface Hub, I get it. So it's definitely a better Microsoft, I'd have to say.
I'm sorry that you had to say that sentence. I feel your pain.
Yeah, it definitely pains me. But, I'm sure there's an Apple event right around the corner,
Oh,
and we'll see.
I'm excited to see what they show. They've done some newish stuff. I like the developer story. They've gotten a lot more with developers, but we'll see. Right. So to preview next episode, we have Apple earnings coming up, so we're switching gears, and I think you're excited about that, right?
Definitely excited. This earnings report should be music to everybody's ears, unless, of course, you're Marcin and you hate Apple. But a disclaimer, I believe Marcin and I definitely own Apple stock, so he shouldn't be too upset. What they're saying is, according to this Ming-Chi Kuo guy, who's an analyst at KGI Securities.
Thank you for the background information.
He's definitely considered one of the most, I don't want to, sensationalize things. He's considered one of the most accurate Apple forecasters. And he's predicting that Apple's going to sell 73 million iPhones.
What?
42 million being iPhone 6s, 16 million being the 6 Pluses, and the rest of the mix. And right now, analysts are saying 66 million. That's what the analysts are looking for in terms of guidance. So 73 versus 66 is going to be incredibly impressive. And if he turns out to be true, we're looking at 43% iPhone growth on a year-over-year basis.
It's very impressive if it comes true, because I remember a point about 1 or 1.5 years ago where the growth was stalling, and that was a little bit scary considering that that's like half of their revenue or even more at this point. Assuming that these results are true, I think that the iPhone is going to be a lot more percentage-wise of the company, right?
Yeah, there's definitely, you had definitely the post Steve Jobs era. There was a lot of people, oh, Apple's doomed, growth is slow, innovation's down. With the iPhone 6 and the Apple Watch, that last two keynotes, I think they really picked things up. And the iPhone 6 being a bigger screen, I think is definitely appealing to a lot more customers. Just one more financial figure. If he's right, if this analyst is right, we're talking about Apple doing $44 billion just of iPhones alone. And for some context, Google is expected to bring in $15 billion in revenue for the whole company. And we're talking about $44 billion, 3 times as much just for iPhones. So truly impressive figures expected.
Okay. One note about the Google thing. I think that they hope they would get that. I don't think they're in the best situation now, reading all the news nowadays about their search revenue and things like that. I think that Google is an interesting company to discuss, but on a later show.
It's so interesting just to see this whole change. It's like a race between Microsoft, Apple, Samsung, and Google. And Apple was doomed, and Microsoft was doomed, and Google was leading, and Samsung was leading, and now we're seeing that change. It's so interesting to see how this race plays out.
Right, and I think just to address the Apple earnings and what I expect, or what I want to see, I want to see how the iPad is doing. I think that's the one, like. They're still selling millions of these things, I'm betting, but the growth rate has definitely slowed down, and I'm wondering if that's strangely because of the hardware story, Microsoft's hardware story starting to come together. The idea of your tablet being a little bit more than a big phone without the phone capability, because that's sort of what the iPad is. Although I know you'll argue there are some apps that are unique to the iPad experience, but I think that's a very interesting thing to look at, and then how that affects their future product launches, as we are hearing rumors about. So thank you for listening this far. We'll keep doing this as long as we have something to discuss, and as long as people like to listen to them. We have, as mentioned, the Apple earnings coming up, so that'll be an interesting episode, and then we'll see you then. Once again, thank you, Nick. Thank you for joining me on this show.
Thank you, Marcin.